Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Mama Saga, and this is the number one place that you go when you love Marvel. You love whatever Marvel Studios does on Disney Plus, and especially if you like to get a lawyer's perspective on things, which is especially useful in a series such as She-Hulk. I have been a Marvel lover since 1986, starting with Uncanny X-Men, going into New Mutants, and so on and so forth. I have also been an attorney since 1998. So I'm going on 20 something years of practicing law. Now, I'm admitted in New York. Matt Murdock, who shows up in this episode, by the way, spoiler city. This is not going to be a spoiler-free situation. So if you haven't seen everything in She-Hulk, especially up to and including episode 8, we have only one more until season 1 concludes, and that's next week while this is live. Well, if you have missed any part or parts of the She-Hulk series up until now, you might want to go back and watch and come back if you're like, oh, spoilers would ruin my experience. You're welcome here anytime, but this live stream, as would be the case in most of my reviews anyway, is a spoilery kind of review. So I just figured I would put that out there. Okay, so with that out of the way, this is my first, when I go live with these things, this is my first review and my first viewing. I'm definitely going to go back and watch more. I caught a couple of things that I take as Easter eggs, and I flagged one or two things that may be Easter eggs, but since I'm jumping on live, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows I'm just fresh off my first viewing. And quite frankly, totally annoying. It turns out that my TV froze, and I was like, great, this is the one where Daredevil shows up, and of course it's going to freeze. So I had to fix that, but I'm here now, and here's the deal. I've got not only my Marvel hat on, but my attorney hat on. Last week, it wasn't so much about any legal drama or necessarily lawyer life. A little bit when we were talking last week about like stress and stuff like that, and lawyer stress and how we can't ever turn off. But in terms of like there being a legal case being showcased, nope, that's not what happened. But every other episode, we've focused on something criminal or something civil. So here, just when I was like, I wonder what else they're going to do, they did what in New York we would call a products liability case. And so in this episode, which is entitled Ribbit and Rip It, which is the the slogan or the catchphrase of Leapfrog. She-Hulk is handling a products liability case in California for Leapfrog. He claims that he was injured due to a malfunction in his custom-made supersuit. It seems more concentrated in the boots for the suit, as we see as the scene plays out, his retelling of the events. And I love how she starts off by saying previously on my show. So like she's getting even more fourth wallish, and she's getting even more like the comic book version of She-Hulk. In the comic book, she could run from panel to panel. She could rip open a page or a panel and scold the audience or the writers. So you see with every episode, as Jennifer Walters is also leaning more into her identity as She-Hulk, that is bleeding through with more confidence and more kind of like involvement with the source material. I also noticed the fourth wall breaks just increase. We had a ton in this episode, which I love. And I would note that when they do the previously on, we end with Emil Blonsky, aka the Abomination, telling Jennifer in a very gentle way. He says, everyone you meet, no matter how much they've hurt you, is a lesson learned. Now, you can watch last week's reaction that quite a few people did, so that's cool. You can see a lot of people who were like thumbs downing on this this series so far said that last week's episode was the best. And I think that even if you still super love last week's episode, this episode, not just because Daredevil was in there, but what happened, I think if you love your action and you love to see, superheroes and supervillains interacting with each other in a more classic way, you're going to love this episode the best, or maybe it's tied with last week's. But they're both like the best in a different way. So again, if you missed episode 7, you should go back and see that one, because the second of the two heroes' journeys, if you know Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, the second of the two heroes' journeys was pretty much wrapped up, where Jennifer was struggling internally with accepting, like, not just She-Hulk in general in her life. She's kind of been making baby steps on that up until episode 7, but she really is able to integrate the She-Hulk and the Jennifer Walters thing as more of a cohesive whole. And you kind of see her slipping in and out between the two versions of herself a whole lot more, and a whole lot more smoothly throughout episode 8. And I don't think that that's by accident. So I love how even that kind of plays into things. And if you've seen the episode, if you know, right? So I love how also Emil's words to her are very important, because the way the episode ends, she kind of has very much been hurt by the Intelligencia and Josh. But now the question is, does she learn, and how is she going to handle everything with the opening scene from what's I'm sure is going to happen in episode 9, the final episode of the series. So I love how, if you didn't know who Leapfrog was, he's very much like a D-list kind of character. And so you're like, I don't know how they're going to play him or what they're going to do with him here. But if you watch the beginning, you'll see that he jumps in on two thieves that are stealing a TV from Nathan's Wholesale. So I don't know if that's like an Easter egg for like Nathan, Nathaniel Richards. I don't know if, what kind of Easter egg that is. I want to go back and study it more. Again, this is just my rough reactions to watching it once so far. But I love how Leapfrog jumps in on the scene and he goes, the store may be closed, but you forgot about the Godfrog. And I'm like, is he the Godfather? Because the Godfather was not a superhero at all. The Godfather was a bad guy. So that was your immediate poker's tell that Leapfrog is still a villain. He's not a sympathetic character. And as they continue to play him out off the jump, I guess, pun intended, the storytelling is really good. So even if you didn't know who that character was in the comic books, you definitely, they make it very clear he's not a sympathetic character, and the way the whole episode ends, you're not feeling sorry for him at all. So we're flashing back and forth between the scene as it really played out and then the recounting of the story by Mr. Patillion or Eugene, who plays Leapfrog on the side. And he's narrating the fact pattern that led to his suit's malfunction, which, as a lawyer, clients typically will have to do, right? The story is very different between what he's telling and what actually happened, at least to some degree. That is not unusual either. Having done this for 22, going on 23 years, geez. I can tell you that what a client will tell me at an initial sit down, it's not unusual for the fact pattern to actually have turned out to be different. And as we're going through the investigatory stage of the litigation, and then of course discovery, if it goes into litigation, we're changing evidence, we're exchanging evidence with both sides. Eventually, at times, I've had to sit down with clients and go, okay, so people lie, the evidence doesn't. I don't know if you're lying. I don't know if you're exaggerating. Let's go through this again, because now things are filling in gaps that you might have left, or you're stylizing yourself to be more the victim or more the hero in this. And gosh, their evidence is showing something a little different. What do we do? What can we do? Is this still a winnable case, etc.? So the fact that Eugene is telling She-Hulk a a little bit different of a spin on the story in terms of what happened. That's very accurate in terms of litigation. We almost never get someone who is a completely reliable narrator. It can be because they're very scared when they come to us, even with civil cases, let alone criminal stuff. And I have not done criminal law. I'm a civil lawyer, but that's okay. The products liability is a civil thing. So I can speak a little bit to what happens in the courtroom with Judge Price and how She-Hulk handled it, to just say it up front. I could see, and then she missed a really good opportunity to still get the discovery that she wanted. This is the first time where I'm like, wow, how it played out in the courtroom, I'd have done something a little different and I would have gotten what she ended up getting denied. But not every attorney, let alone has my experience, but not every attorney is playing three-dimensional chess. She was going at it two-dimensional and she lost this time. But then again, she got a stinky fact pattern too as the court case plays out. And I'll say this up front too. Lawyers are only good as the files that they get and the clients that they have. We're advocates. We're not gods or goddesses that can obviously give you a guaranteed outcome. We're not like that. One of my students for my content marketing coach YouTube channel under my name, Stacey Storino, she made this for me because I'm always saying, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict how certain things are going to go in your marketing campaign. But there are things that you can do with your ideal customer research, and there are things that you can do in terms of your industry research that can help to tilt the odds more in your favor of an outcome. So she made that for me to bust my chops. I'm like, fine, I have a crystal ball. It doesn't work. Give me one that works. So anyway, Eugene is telling Jennifer a version of the story that kind of fits, but he's obviously stylizing it so he's way more awesome than he really was. He's acting like he's some sort of great vigilante or great sort of super villain. And he stinks. Okay. The reality is he sucks. He can't fight very well. His outfit looks nice, but like what he's saying he can do is kind of not matching up. He turns on his rocket style boots to get out of there. He says his signature catchphrase, time to ribbit and rip it. And then the boots malfunction, right? So, or allegedly malfunction. Well, they don't work the way it had been intended that they work. It looks like he might have a case. And depending upon the facts and circumstances, he might have. He crashes to the ground. He gets injured. His allegedly inflammable suit is on fire, but then he clarifies and said it's supposed to be basically inflammable to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, but nope, he's got third-degree burns on his legs. So, you start to think to yourself, if this is your first viewing, is it that the rocket boosters and or the boots were defective? Is it because the suit isn't truly inflammable to 900 degrees Fahrenheit? Or was it that the fuel and the fire that was used, is that something that's so powerful that it exceeds 900 degrees Fahrenheit? We don't know, right? We don't know as we're sitting there right now. So, of course, we're back in the office and he's wrapping up his version of the story during this client intake, right? She hasn't officially had him sign a retainer agreement yet. And so, of course, Leapfrog says what so many plaintiffs or aspiring plaintiffs often say when it's a personal injury case, right? And a products liability case is often under the umbrella of personal injury. Sometimes it can be exclusively property damage, but I digress. Here it's his personal injury because of the third-degree burns that he's gotten in both his legs. So he says, I deserve justice and compensation for all of my pain and suffering. Now, to be honest with you, if you're a layperson, you're like, this sounds very canned. But I'm telling you, especially with the internet and the interwebs of all these things, when somebody is imagining themselves to be a plaintiff, they're looking up all the magic words. You could watch courtroom dramas on TV or stuff, and you could know the magic words to say, like, my pain and my suffering, and I deserve compensation and justice. So The writing to a layperson may initially sound forced, but again, I've been at this for well over 2 decades. I've had plenty of people come to me and utter this very same phrase. So the writing is actually very accurate to this. So Jennifer's heard his telling of the facts, and she says this appears to be a pretty clear case of manufacturer's defect, general negligence, strict liability, and breach of warranty. Each one of these is its own separate cause of action. A lot of the evidence can help you to buttress and support each cause of action. General negligence is something that they just throw in there kind of as a catch-all. But with products liability cases, you can get that kind of scooted in if you want. Now, again, I practice New York law. She practices Californian law. There is quite a bit of difference, but there's enough of a framework for me to feel very confident that she's definitely identified each of the main causes of action for a products liability case. Okay, so this all fits under the umbrella of products liability. So whoever manufactured either the suit itself, which didn't apparently hold up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and or the boots, that's manufacturer's defect. Negligence could be the negligence in the overall construction of the suit. It can also cover any of the representations that were allegedly made by the individual who created this super suit to Eugene. Strict liability is often its own separate cause of action, but the way, in this case, Californian statute is written, if you have a successful products liability case, you're going to, once you've proven all of the prongs of that legal test, then strict liability comes in. So they can't weasel out of it by saying, oh, but, maybe Eugene did something to the suit, maybe tweaked it when he shouldn't have after he got it. He should have left it alone. Or maybe Eugene didn't follow all the instructions perfectly as given to him. If they can prove the manufacturer's defect, products liability, then they're held strictly liable. They can't have, they can't successfully, in a case like this, argue contributory negligence against the plaintiff. Because in many cases you can, in many cases a statute will allow for it. And I've done defense work roughly as much as I've done plaintiff's work through the 2+ decades that I practiced. And so if I'm representing the defendant, I'm desperate to get as much contributory negligence against the plaintiff as possible. So whatever award of damages can be reduced by whatever percentage a judge and or jury would give against the plaintiff for their contributory negligence. When you have strict liability come in, you lose the opportunity as the attorney for the defendant to say, hey, contributory negligence of the plaintiff, so maybe we can reduce it 50-50 or 70-30 or whatever. Nope, strict liability says that once we prove our case with the main cause of action, once we claim the strict liability portion that we can do via statute, that's it. You can't reduce the damages at all. It's 100% against the defendant if they're found guilty. And then breach of warranty. So you have warranty of fitness. When I sell a product to you, I warrant that for all of the uses that it is intended, as long as you use it in exactly the way it was intended and don't color outside the lines, there could be found a breach of warranty of fitness. So, not every product is applicable for use or safe for use in every possible imaginable way. That's why there's this separate claim that she cites to a breach of warranty. So as a practicing lawyer who has handled products liability cases before, both plaintiff and defendant, a little bit more as defendant, I would tell you that the writing is very accurate to what I would see in court if I were representing, in this case, Eugene Leapfrog. So very well done. And so she does wrap up her claim to Judge Price, who's hearing this. She believes that her client, if she can prove any or all of these causes of action, she doesn't necessarily have to prove all of them, but even if she proves one of them, then her client would be owed what's referred to in the law as compensatory damages. So he might not just get for his pain and suffering currently, he could get future pain and suffering because he's a burn victim. They're going to have to change the wounds. He's going to have scarring. So the scarring has a separate value in a personal injury case, whether we're talking products liability or not. Does he need skin grafting surgery? I mean, third degree burns, okay? But first degree, of course, are way worse. He's also possibly owed financial compensation, even if it's just simply a refund for anything that he laid out to the manufacturer for the supersuit in the first place. And depending upon the facts and circumstances of what a judge and or jury would award Leapfrog, if he were successful here, he might be able to get additional funds to go buy a new suit from someone else that isn't the defendant. Unfortunately for Jennifer Walters, the name of the manufacturer is Luke Jacobson, who has been creating stuff for her since 2 episodes ago. So she's like, oops. So the scene change goes, and she's in Holloway's office, her partner, and she says, listen, I don't want this case. Jacobson's the only tailor that I can go to because of my unique needs. Can Anthony Pugliese take the case? But, listen, he's busy with other cases, as all attorneys at a busy firm are. There's nothing wrong, by the way, with Jennifer asking her partner, maybe can I not take this case? So what would happen if Holloway had said, you know what, all right, like Pug has, his dance card isn't completely full. I'll give the case to Pug. You owe him one. Okay, fair. What would happen, because Jennifer's already spoken to Eugene when she did the client intake. She would then be what's called Chinese walled from the case. She would never touch it again. No mail would come to her. No phone conferences would come to her, et cetera, et cetera. And she would just be left out in the cold. Okay. The firm can still take the case. It's just that particular attorney can't touch it anymore. She's conflicted out. So she's arguing a conflict of interest here. However, Holloway is also like, listen, keep in mind, Leapfrog's father, Mr. Pertillion, is apparently one of our firm's biggest clients. Geez, and so is Todd, the creepy Todd. So you do have all of these law firm politics, and this is something that happens very commonly. And the bigger the firm, the more people come to them, the more often this can be a potential issue. So the client is very excited to have a Hulk on the case, he tells her, and they're willing to sign a conflict waiver. So they know that she's been a customer of Luke Jacobson in the past, so they would need to sign a conflict waiver because they know that she's a customer, and now she's going to have to prosecute him on their behalf. So there is a potential client. Holloway is not saying no. In fact, the client, well, really Eugene's father, who they never give the full name to, or the first name of, he doesn't care. So father and son are like, that's fine. She can represent us. I did a video in the past that talked about how you can handle a conflict issue if you're, say, She-Hulk. So let's see, She-Hulk. I have a couple ones of these that I want to do. So I did pin as the first comment the playlist for She-Hulk. I have a couple of different playlists going on for different properties, but I did talk about She-Hulk's conflict of interest that she had in episode 1 when Holloway wanted her to represent the Abomination. So conflict of interest video. I'll put the link to it here. The link is for the entire She-Hulk playlist down below, where I bust things out, not just in terms of comic book versus series, but legal issues too. I like how they handled everything in episode 1 for the conflict of interest. So if you don't know exactly how they could pull that off here and what they do to document it and why Holloway not being worried about a potential conflict is legit, you could see that video. I just did the link to the separate conflict of interest video down below. Okay, so But Jennifer says that she would still nevertheless, in this case, be ethically compromised in terms of representing this client, Leapfrog, against Luke Jacobson. Why was she not as ethically compromised the first time around? Because she spoke to her cousin, and Bruce Banner said, I'm so over it. She'd even spoken to Emil Blonsky, and he said, I'm so over it. I've done a lot of inner work. It's been a lot of years. I'm no threat to him or anybody else. And then she felt satisfied about it. So she resolved her own ethical conflict within herself. Her cousin Bruce, I think, signed something, but I know Emil did as well. So she could go forward at the parole hearing in episode 1 to hear him and wasn't conflicted out. Here she's still morally and ethically compromised if she wants to continue to be a customer of Luke Jacobson, which she does. So now Holloway makes a fair suggestion. Talk to Jacobson off the record and come to an agreement about how to settle the case so that a filing isn't necessary. So she brought the facts and circumstances to Luke Jacobson, and he was like, ew, I don't normally do boots like that, and they're having malfunctioned. All right, fine. I'll settle this for a fair amount. My bad. Would it have been impossible for that to have played out in real life? No, I've seen this sort of thing happen all the time. Someone will settle, the settlement will be private, nothing's in the public archives or filing systems in courthouses, and everyone can save face. Things happen. So Holloway's suggestion is not flimsy. So Jennifer, we have a scene change. She goes to Jacobson's salon. She raises the issue to Jacobson, but of course he's offended and he's like, my work is impeccable. How dare you? I've never made a defective suit in my life. So he says, I'll blacklist you as a client if you even go forward with this. And she said, too bad, I'll see you in court. And then we are in court in the next scene. We have Judge Price on the bench. Leapfrog is acting like a man-child in the courtroom, just like he was doing in Jennifer's office. You'd think her taking his feet and putting him off the desk in her office would be one thing. Like, who would do that if they're not a man-child? To do it in a courtroom shows he really doesn't care about the judge. He doesn't care about anybody. He's spoiled and privileged. So you're like, wow, this client and this character is even less sympathetic than when he started this episode. So, and the judge could sanction him. So she's definitely getting his feet off the table. Mr. Jacobson is possibly their pro se, meaning representing himself. He doesn't have his lawyer sitting with him. So Judge Price, of course, says to him, hey, before we start, are you here pro se? That part isn't really real, okay? Because in a real life courtroom, if Mr. Jacobson was pro se, he would have put in his answer to the plaintiff's complaint, and he would have just listed himself and his home address or his business address or both and say pro se, meaning I'm representing myself. I'm my own attorney. This is not typically a good idea. I don't care how much or how little the potential financial exposure is. The court can't help you if you ever go in real life and you represent yourself. The clerks and the people working in the office can't help you. They can't give you legal guidance, and they'll usually tell you that. And there's usually documents and signage that says that. But in real life, Judge Price would have known that Mr. Jacobson was defending himself because the attorney who filed the answer to the complaint would have, identified themselves as his counsel. So that is one of the very rare times that I do not feel that this series is about as real as it can get with the supernatural overlay to it. So Jennifer's sitting there pretending like she didn't get an answer to the complaint, that somehow Luke Jacobson's going to represent himself. And she whispers to Leapfrog, start planning how you're going to be spending all your new money. Because usually an attorney will wipe the floors with a layperson, even if they're really book smart. But Jacobson snaps, of course I'm not representing myself, Your Honor. I'm not a fool. And he's not, because in comes his attorney, and it's Matt Murdock. So fine, we knew that either this episode, the last episode, episode 9, or potentially both, you were going to see Matt Murdock. Along the way, they let out that you'd only see him in one episode. So here he is in this episode. And of course, he comes in, he apologizes for being late. He says, oh, I had trouble finding parking. He says, JK, my driver just got a little lost. So, he's very clearly blind. Jennifer's taking all that in. He's got his cane, he finds a seat, and then he immediately moves to, dismiss Jennifer's motion to compel some discovery. This is not unusual. You can make a motion to compel it, you can file a demand, you could do both. She might have filed a demand, and if there were an attorney from the start, you'd normally have a denial, and then she could make a motion to compel. That's how you could have both. So he says he's not turning over his client's list of customers. He argues it's not relevant to the litigation. And Jennifer does her first of many fourth wall breaks for the episode. And she's like, who is this a-hole? Now, I don't curse on my channel, but she said something a little stronger. So then she argued that, yes, it is relevant discovery, which, to be fair, her argument is very sound. She says that it's relevant given the specific nature of the complaint. It's a products liability case. Okay, so she says there's a possibility that there could have been multiple instances of Mr. Jacobson's clients sustaining similar injuries from faulty merchandise, especially like the supersuit that her client, Leapfrog, got. So you would, as the plaintiff's attorney, be seeking this documentation, and normally the clientele would have to be turned over. Just because Luke Jacobson told her that he never sold anyone a faulty suit doesn't mean he's not lying, right? So Matt Murdock says, counsel should know that my client's record when it comes to customer satisfaction is spotless, meaning Jennifer should know better. She is a client of his. So she argues that this kind of evidence, rightly so, is common to seek out in cases of this kind. Customer satisfaction aside, that's only one part of the story. He could have dissatisfied clients. He could have injured clients. So it's relevant to the claims made in the lawsuit. Okay, this bears out in real life. She says there's no inherent right to privacy when it comes to Mr. Jacobson's tailoring services. I dare say he does more than tailor, but that's okay. Matt Murdock says, listen, the very nature of Jacobson's line of work involves superheroes, which necessitates anonymity. Okay. Then he says a very important line, and I think this is the first time in the MCU we've known this. The Sokovia Accords have been repealed. I'm going to do a separate video on that from a lawyer's view. I find that very interesting, and I'll tell you why in that episode. So She-Hulk says superheroes are out in the public eye. It's their choice to be so. So as public figures, it is assumed that they will have a loss of some rights of privacy. Now, public figures in U.S. law, that's true. You can be a limited public figure, or you could be a full-blown public figure. Full-blown public figures like politicians basically have almost no right to privacy, right? Someone could lie about them, and you could even prove that there are lies. And depending upon the facts and circumstances, there could be little to no recourse that one politician might have against another, or that one politician might have against some sort of interest group that spreads lies about them. That's why you really don't ever want in real life to ever be found to be a full-blown public figure. You will have next to no protections. So Jennifer's trying to stylize this as superheroes are public figures. They put themselves out. They hold themselves out in front of society that way. So not that she's saying they get all loss of privacy, but some loss of privacy. And in this case, they're going to have to be identified on the client list, which is a discovery that I'm seeking to help buttress and support my case. So Matt Murdock says we're not talking about celebrities, which is true. We're talking about superheroes, which means that people will try to harm them and the people close to them. No offense to Matt Murdock. There are crazies and lunatic fringes out there that could try to hurt celebrities too. Okay. So that's a little not the best argument, but it's one I would make in court if I were he. Miss Walters, he goes on, chose her identity to be public, but it is not for her to choose for everyone else. That's a fair thing to say. And I'm sitting there going, oh, so you don't want, because if you saw one of the prior episodes, you saw the box with the Daredevil golden red costume in it, right? So, you know that Matt Murdock isn't just arguing on behalf of his client, and his arguments are fine and fair regardless, but you know that he's got a degree of self-interest because he will be outed. And just like in Daredevil in the comics, And just like in Daredevil in, I guess, the MCU now, because the Netflix series has been acknowledged to be mostly canon. There may be tweaks and differences, but mostly canon. So the general public really doesn't know who Matt Murdock is as Daredevil and vice versa, and he wants to keep it that way. So he says, listen, if you allow for this exchange of discovery, it could ruin my client's career and it can put a lot of people in danger. So Jennifer doesn't do something that I would have done at this point. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have said what she said had I represented the plaintiff. I'm not saying that what Matt Murdock is saying is off base because he's representing the interests of Luke Jacobson, the defendant. Maybe all of this discourse would have been had in the court on the record, but you know what? At this point, if I start to see Judge Price's face go, all right, I'm more inclined to, align myself with the defendant on this application, I would have turned around and been like, you know what, Your Honor, if you have any concerns about anybody's privacy or the need for Luke Jacobson to have a client list that assures anonymity so that he's not suddenly gutted and unable to work, I get that. What I'll do is I'll amend my motion on the floor, let the record reflect, because there's a court reporter sitting there taking down everything everyone says. I will amend my motion so that it will allow for an exchange of discovery where it's only reviewed in camera, meaning in the judge's chambers. So the judge will see it, Matt Murdock will see it, and Jennifer Walters will see it. Counsel and judge only. Now, if there's nothing to see here, there's nothing to see here from the records. However, if it turns out that in the investigation, she ends up identifying, a party who was a paying customer of Luke Jacobson's that did have a faulty supersuit, what could they do at that point? Well, the judge could issue a written decision saying, we're only going to see these records in camera. They're only going to be able to do very restricted discovery. And if anything is found, we will have documents that are redacted. And the non-party witness who did end up getting injured, if they don't want to somehow bring their own claim publicly, as is their right, that's fine. But, we will have video only testimony taken from them, and there will be restrictions that the videos can never be made public, right? And or now the public court file is sealed, so no one can see any of this information and or exchange of discovery on the record. There's a bunch of things that she could have done to amend her motion, and there are ways that the judge could have granted her the discovery that she sought with many restrictions. That said, she didn't make that argument. Matt Murdock goes and suggests that as part of the defense anyway, this shouldn't be allowed to be an exchange of discovery for one man's misuse of a suit. So here goes that whole contributory negligence thing that I mentioned earlier. He is making reference to the fact that he might have a very defensible case because Leapfrog misused the suit that he was given. That could alter the controlling fact pattern that the plaintiff is alleging. But Judge Price agrees to deny the motion. Jennifer doesn't do what I would have done if I were in her shoes. Again, this could have been solved a very different way if this were a real life case. So the plaintiff, member Eugene Leapfrog, has a tantrum, which can often happen in a courtroom. Lay people forget themselves, they ignore the courtroom decorum, and they act ridiculous sometimes. So Matt Murdock sits there and sniffs because don't forget, he's a daredevil. He may be blind, but he has like all sorts of echolocation kind of abilities, and his other senses are heightened. For blind people in real life, that can be the case too, but for him, it's elevated because, he's Daredevil. So he's like, Mr. Portillo, what kind of fuel did you use in your supersuit or your supersuit boots? And he admits that it's jet fuel. And he's got this ridiculous smile on his face, like he's such a poser. And as the audience member, he just did himself in. So, Luke Jacobson says, you use jet fuel in your boosters because that is not how my instructions read. And She-Hulk's like, oh my gosh. So Judge Price kind of hurries things up because if there's not an exchange of discovery where Luke Jacobson says these are the exact, instructions I gave to the client for him to use that suit and what fuel to put in his rocket boots or whatever, That would be the manufacturer's instructions, right? So Judge Price isn't waiting for an exchange of discovery. That's kind of not really real life, but the judge says if the plaintiff ignored the manufacturer's explicit instructions, then the defendant is absolved of all liability. Now, if there were a formal exchange of discovery and stuff, then fine. The judge can do that. The judge can at that point, because you do have a record supporting the claims and the representations of the defendant, at that point, even if somebody didn't file a motion, a judge could sua sponte or under their own judicial powers just say, this case is a waste of judicial economy. The file already contains the discovery responses back and forth. Leapfrog ignored the specific manufacturer's instructions and used a different fuel in the boots. So case dismissed. He does dismiss the case, or as Madison would have said from a couple of episodes ago, case closed. And so Leapfrog's biggest concern at this point is, will I go to jail? That's another poker's tell that he clearly is a bad guy. In the courtroom, he tried what he tried, and that's one thing, but he's a bad guy outside of the courtroom. Why is he calling himself the God Frog? What, like the Godfather, like he's some sort of criminal mastermind in the first part of the episode? Why is he his first concern is, am I going to go to jail? Jennifer says to him, no, but I would like you to, because this was not only a big waste of her time. Yeah, the firm's getting paid, but she lost a case that I'm sure the father is going to be upset about regardless. And now her tailor very clearly doesn't want to do work for her anymore. She asks, and he's like, basically, go stuff it. So then we have a scene change to the legalese bar. And Jennifer gets an appletini sent over to her, green drink. She's a She-Hulk, haha. But it turns out the guy sending her the drink is Matt Murdock. So he wants to join her. And as soon as he did, he says, I wanted to send a peace offering. That doesn't necessarily have to be a come on. When attorneys want to get along with each other, we might go out for a drink afterwards or go grab a bite to eat. Oh, you lost in court today. I cleaned your clock. It's my treat. That's not unusual. That doesn't mean that anyone's coming on to anybody. However, as they sat there and continue to go back and forth with each other, I was like, are they coming on to each other? Like, what is this? So Jennifer asks what Matt Murdock's story is, because she's looked into his license to practice law, and it identifies that he came from New York, but he's come out to California on a products liability case, which you can do. You can be licensed in numerous jurisdictions. Depending upon the state, they can allow you to appear pro hoc vice, which means with permission of the court. We don't know how he did this. It doesn't matter. Either which way, he could have been there. And that's real life. Someone pays you enough, you'll travel anywhere where the court will take you and or you're admitted. So interestingly enough, Matt Murdock says to her off the jump that Lou Jacobson made a couple of suits for him. So he was out that way anyway. And Jennifer looks at the suit and she goes, it doesn't look like it, because she's thinking super suit and she's not putting two and two together. And while it's true that Luke Jacobson can make streetwear, he ends up making her gown later on. He's not the type of person that an everyday person's going to come to. So this is kind of a dopey move on Jen's part not to pick up. You had to basically go to him like he was the Wizard of Oz a couple of episodes ago. The average everyday person, attorney or not, is not necessarily going to go to him. So, they're joking back and forth. And then we kind of have a mini exposition dump where she's like, you have your own practice. And he's like, have you been checking up on me? You can, as attorneys, you can, and you should, to prepare for your cases. You want to know where somebody's expertise lies. How many years have they been practicing? If he's admitted in California too, instead of showing up pro hoc vice, that could tell her he's not really as well versed in Californian law, right? So as prep to go into the courtroom, you would want to look into another attorney. That's very true. That's very practice driven. The writing is nuanced there, but it also allows for an exposition dump. So she asked him how he knew about the jet fuel. He just said a hunch, which, he could have said I'm blind and our senses are heightened, and that's more normal anyway. That's not giving away that he's a superhero too necessarily. So, Jennifer admits that, the guy's a loser. She even calls him a loser, her client, and tells him, his dad, the client's father, is a very important client. So, unfortunately, I had to take this case. And then Matt Murdock explains that he had his practice in Hell's Kitchen in New York, and he does mostly pro bono work and will only take on paying clients when the bills start piling up. So this is more true to form for a lot of the comic book saga journey that Matt Murdock's gone on. Um, you know, um, he's worked for the DA's office, he's had his own practice, he's had different versions of his own practice as he struggles with, wanting to be an attorney or not, because that's been part of his character arc in the comic book saga. She-Hulk and Daredevil, friends or foes. Now, this is one of the videos that's in my playlist, but I'm going to highlight it here because I do talk about the comic book saga that these two have gone on and whether or not they've really been friends with one another or not in the comic books in the past. Then I do talk about both's character arc or journey as attorneys and whether they want to be attorneys or whether they want to be superheroes or vigilantes or both, and who balances it out to be a better professional. So better attorney video, that one I will also link to down below, along with the conflict of interest video that I've done in the past that talks about why she doesn't necessarily have to be conflicted out to represent Eugene Leapfrog there. Okay, so then Jen talks about the secret lives of Matt Murdock and how does he do it. She doesn't fully understand who he is yet, but it's kind of like teasing what we already know about the character. And again, as Marvel Studios said, largely the Netflix series is canon to the MCU. So that's kind of cool. And for us, the audience, it's reaffirming, okay, what you already know about Matt Murdock, that's in play here in Earth 616. So that's cool. So then she says, as someone who works for them or the clients all the time, I don't really have gas in the tank to do much of anything else. And this is where Matt Murdock says to her, you can say that, but you're in a unique position to do some real good. The way I see it, Jennifer Walters can help a lot of people in court when society fails them, and she can also help them when the world fails them. You can contribute. So they toast to the best of both worlds. Matt gets a call, and during that point in time where he steps away to take it, Jen goes, we're all feeling this, right? Like it's a fourth wall break. It's not just me. And I have to say that up until now, as I'm sitting there watching their going back and forth at the bar, I'm like, is this like a romantic thing? Because I gotta be honest with you, in the comic book saga, they were friends. They were very close friends. And Jennifer would often travel to Matt Murdock for advice, right? Advice as superheroes, even advice as attorneys. They were in court against one another. I think only once she was representing Captain America for a pre-Captain America claim or case that was brought against him, where the allegation was that he incited a situation that led to the wrongful death of someone. I believe that was a Dan Slott story, and that was a really good one. Just in general, and as a lawyer, you're like, wow, because there were a lot of arguments that Jennifer introduced to Cap, and he said, no, don't do that. I know that you could, but don't. I want this to go strictly on the merits. I want to know that I won this thing clean. She wasn't saying anything shady, but there were some procedural things that she suggested, and he was like, no. And then she tried to get Matt Murdock kicked off as the attorney on behalf of the state, which she could have done without telling you, without getting into it here. And Cap was like, no, he's really honorable. If someone has to prosecute me, I want it to be them. So Steve Rogers was goody two shoes central, as he typically is. You'd be disappointed if he didn't. Well, there was that whole other storyline with Cap and Hydra, but I digress. Okay. So she gets a text from Todd in the meantime. Creepy Todd. that she went out on a date with, who thought that she was such a specimen and that offended her. He says, I have a legal issue that I would like to discuss immediately. And he wants to meet at 8 p.m. at what turns out to be a fine dining restaurant, the Hoof and Fleur. And she describes him to the camera. She does a fourth wall break, making sure we remember who Todd was, just in case. He was a tech bro with a She-Hulk fetish, which is a funny way to put it. And she really doesn't want to do this. Now, if you're wondering if this is unusual for clients to text you and call you and email you and message you on Messenger even around the clock, sadly, no, it is not. I've had clients do that at all sorts of hours. I worked at a firm years ago where the partner would call me at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he knew I was a deep sleeper, and he would even joke. The record was he called me 12 times until I finally woke up. And he wasn't even mad because he knew I was a deep sleeper. But I wasn't allowed to get mad because he was my partner and he signed my paychecks. And clients, the bigger they are and the more money they pay, they tend to feel entitled, even in just the range of, I paid all this money, you have this huge retainer for me, and if I need help now, I need help now. That's why I gave you extra money, and or that's why I came to this firm. And Todd even throws it at her later to be like, what did he say? He texted her basically saying, I was reassured that by Holloway that this was a 24/7 law firm. Should I contact him to see if that representation was inaccurate? I hate to tell you, there are some clients that don't even care that you're driving and you need to find a place to pull aside. They get really snotty really fast. Hey, Lenny Fiasco, what's going on? I didn't know that lawyers were on call like doctors. Well, we shouldn't be. We should have office hours, and we do technically have office hours where, in our vernacular, for our kind of corporate culture, it's called FaceTime. But sadly, FaceTime isn't the only time that you're supposed to be available to a firm, to clients. I often tell people who want their kids to go off and be lawyers, I'm like, your child may have no life. Be very, very careful. If that child didn't want to go be a lawyer, it's like God or the universe made them to be an attorney, then they should go be who they're going to be. But, you pay a heavy price for what they do. According to the American Bar Association, the average attorney's billable hours are between 60 to 80 hours a week. That's billable hours. That's not the time they're in the bathroom. That's not the time that they're sleeping. So we're not talking 40 hours ever for an attorney on average, whether they're in New York, California, or anywhere else. So Todd is acting like the typical high-paying client, believe it or not. This is not off the chain at all. Even when he texts, some folks come out and say as much or text as much. So we get to the restaurant. It's on Wilshire Boulevard, so I want to see if that's an Easter egg. I can't recall. Again, this is just my first viewing. So Jennifer shows up as She-Hulk to satisfy that fetish that he has. And to also show this is nothing personal. This is business for her. So she asks what the urgent matter was that he wanted to discuss with her. And meanwhile, he's all relaxed, trying to give her wine. She's saying no. He's acting like it's anything but a business meeting, which is annoying, and some clients do this too. He's also wearing crushed green velvet attire, and I'm like, oh, alrighty then. And is it because he's the Hulk King? You wonder that, okay? You wonder that. Or is it the leader who's the Hulk King? Okay, again, I said spoiler city. I've talked about this in other lives and videos before on my channel. So then he says, I went to an art auction and they had our authentic Wakandan war gear for sale. This is vibranium. Remember, he was asking her on their date a couple of episodes ago if vibranium would penetrate her skin. And she said she didn't know. And she said, my skin can't be pierced by anything here on Earth. But remember the whole thing about vibranium, it came from outer space and it crashed into what became Wakanda, right? So he now has access to vibranium. That makes you wonder if he is the Hulk King, if that needle that we saw at the end of the previous, nope, it's 2 episode ago. You saw, you didn't know who, it was in a lab and they put this huge needle that seemed all shiny and special. So you're like, ooh, is that vibranium? So now he's trying to throw around his weight and be like, I of course won the auction. Okay. And he's like, I spent a milli. Ew. He's flexing. And she's unimpressed. And he thinks she's unimpressed because she doesn't understand what a milli means. So he clarifies, and she's still unimpressed. And then he's like, $1 million. And she's like, I got that. Because here's the thing. Number one, he's just creepy because it's not like they were continuing to date, right? Number two, he's pulling rank on her. I'm a paying client. And number three, you come when I tell you to, even if it's not during FaceTime hours or office hours. And now he's going to be all cash and throwing his weight around. She has every right to be pissed. But notice how she's not telling him off because they can't afford to lose that client, and or she doesn't want to lose her job. I have been there too, okay? Not out on a date like that, to be fair, but I've had people call, I've had people drop in the office, and I'm like, I have dinner plans and leaving. They don't care, okay? And then they get mad when you don't want to shoot the breeze with them. This happens. It happens all the time. So the people, the writers, they did their research. This happens all the time. So then he's showing her a picture on his cell phone. He's posing with the friggin' spear that he got. And he wants her to say how cool this is. You know, he wants her to kind of go into a swoon about the fact that he spent $1 million and he has this thing. And he goes, I mean, I own that now. Like, he can't possibly like thrust out in front of her and peacock any harder, right? No one is collecting African stuff at that level. I love Wakanda. Then interestingly, he said, I studied abroad there. And now she's interested because she's like, oh, really? Because that is interesting. And she's not swooning over the money. She's not swooning over the possession. It's like, oh, how cool. You studied in Wakanda? Because Wakanda does have their tech program. You do have to be pretty able-bodied and able-minded to be studying over in Wakanda. That's interesting. That's praiseworthy. But he doesn't go into that. All he does is get smarmy with the Wakanda forever thing. And she's like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. So then she's like, is there a legal issue with the purchase? Like, she keeps trying to get back to like, why am I here? You said this was for business. You were going to tattletale my partner if I didn't come running, you know, on the spot for you. So he moves closer to her. You can tell she doesn't like it. And he goes, well, apparently they want it back. They're claiming that it was stolen, but whatever, I've got the receipts, which again shows him to be a callous, very unsympathetic character, much like how Leapfrog was stylized or shown from the beginning. So he's like, listen, babe, which is so gross. Let's drop the whole thing because I don't play games and I can feel it. And I can tell that we're both feeling it. And he's grabbing her hand and she's like, nope, goodbye. And she takes her briefcase and leaves and tells him that she's billing him for the whole hour. I think the fact that he dropped a little bit of exposition about he has access to vibranium, he collects this stuff, and that he was off studying in Wakanda, that's going to come into play in the final episode. And I also think, and I'll just say this right now, that if for some reason he's not somehow permanently neutralized at the end of episode 9, we're going to see Todd run off with the leader, and that's all going to be part of Captain America New World Order. Okay, so now she comes into her house. She's just aggravated. She's in her Jennifer Walters form, throws herself on the couch. She gets a text message, or her phone is vibrating because someone's calling her. It's Leapfrog. He's in trouble. She says she'll meet up with him, because he tells her where he's going to kind of like get away from whatever trouble he's in. So she goes to her closet. The Avengers music is playing, and she grabs the Luke Jacobson comic book accurate supersuit that he had made for her. So now we get to the parking garage scenes. If you didn't know that Daredevil might appear in this episode, now you do. So you're probably all in a tizzy like I was. And you can tell that on top of Leapfrog's car, there's, Daredevil. You could see the swoosh of like green and red. So she jumps in front of the car to stop it. What is Leapfrog worried about? Not, oh my God, am I hurt? Oh my God, are you hurt, Jennifer? No. Oh, my car. He could not be any less sympathetic if they tried, right? So she warns Daredevil. She has no idea who he is. She's never seen him before. She tells him to back off. Let's see. They fight. Daredevil keeps warning her she's making a mistake. She's like, you made a mistake, trying to go after my client. And she warns him that she's going to whoop his butt. She doesn't care. And she tries to get him, and he's like, my butt remains unwhooped. And you can kind of feel a little bit of like playful energy between the two of them. So she's not phased. She does her She-Hulk sonic boom clap that we saw her master at towards the end of episode 1. The sound wave. It's not just a shock wave that physically sends him into the car. The sound wave, right? Because all of his senses are heightened because he doesn't have a sight. That's killing him. So she grabs him, scruffs him, and unmasks him. And then she's like, Matt? And then what she does is really important here. To show that she's no more of a threat to him now, she immediately goes down into her Jennifer Walters form. Remember what she learned in the last episode. She can accept the cohesive whole. So she goes in and out of Jennifer versus She-Hulk very fluidly. And it's a poker's tell that she did this because she's like, I'm no threat, I'm human again. And then she's mad because she says, did you pretend to be blind? Because he's fighting her very well. He goes, I am blind. Okay, so this is kind of like a mini exposition dump. If you don't really understand his character, or it's been a minute since you've seen him in the comics, if you follow the Netflix series, then you understand. But he's got to kind of explain it here just so that every audience member is covered. He says, I am blind, but I have a spatial method that I use to see. So she's like, echolocation. And he's like, yeah, kind of. So then, of course, she asks the obvious question, why are you attacking my client? And he's like, Leapfrog is the bad guy here. He kidnapped Luke Jacobson and he's holding him hostage. So then she's like, well, why didn't you tell me that before we fought? He's like, why didn't you ask me before you tried to whoop my butt? So now you've got this banter going even after they understand who each other is. And then you're tying it together with everything they felt in the bar. So then she jokes, I'm sorry, but I assume the guy dressed as the devil was the bad one. And he's like, that's a fair point. So she's like, are you a superhero? Like a gold devil? And, she's digging on him. If it wasn't super clear before, it is now, right? So, he's like, I'm Daredevil. That's supposed to mean something for her. She has no idea who he is, which is hilarious. And she shrugs, and then she just jokes like she could care less, right? All the huge Daredevil fans are like, oh my God. And she's like, whatever. Then she goes, it's interesting that you've used ketchup and mustard as your color scheme. So she doesn't care. There's no sacred cows for her. And he's like, so how about I tell Luke that you said that? And she's like, oh no, So, and then the grin that he gives her, I'm like, oh my God, they are not doing this. Because in the comic books, if I'm not mistaken, they never got it on, right? And they were just friends. And he was a mentor to her because he's had a lot of experience with the vigilante and the balance of, this is work-life balance for a lawyer, but in a very different way. And she would come to him for advice like that. They weren't knocking boots though, my goodness. So then, okay, long story short, they go to the lily pad, which was supposed to be his secret lair. And she's like, real subtle. And Eugene is clearly forcing poor Luke Jacobson to create a new suit for him. He wants bulletproof shields. He wants the works. And then here comes yet another Iron Man, Easter egg. So he's like, I want an AI with like a cool British accent that's going to, help me out. And I'm like, how many Iron Man Easter eggs do you possibly, need? And I've done a video on my channel. I don't have the link for it now, but it's in a separate playlist. And I didn't do it too terribly long ago where I'm talking about all the She-Hulk Easter eggs collectively up until that particular episode. We're like 2 episodes ago now. I've been arguing they're going to bring back Iron Man more actively into Earth 616. I don't know that it's going to be RDJ, but it could be, but I don't think so. I think if you see him, you're going to see him in a multiverse sort of way, cameo style. But they're going to be bringing back a version of Iron Man. It's real difficult, if you ask me, to have Avengers without Iron Man factoring into the equation. Lenny Fiasco says, I'm hoping they don't make them romantically involved just because I feel like that would be too easy. A close platonic relationship like the comics would be cool. Who knows? Disney didn't care about being comic book accurate. Well, here's the thing, Lenny. If you didn't see the episode, like I said, this is spoiler city. What they did, one could argue before the episode ended, I don't think it necessarily means that they're romantically involved. I think that, yeah, no, I knew what you meant, Justin. Hi, Justin. Good to see you. And Justin had said, who knows, Disney didn't care about being comic book accurate. I understand. I understand. And they have to mix it up. I love Rob from Comics Explained. I love him. And Rob made the argument a while ago, not necessarily about this particular series, but in general. He likes the fact that they're not being just slavishly comic book accurate, because hardcore comic book fans like himself and myself, we want to be surprised, and we want there to be little nuances that we're like, oh, we couldn't have seen that coming, or oh, well played. So I think they're doing their best to have a fusion blend of what you would expect comic book accurate wise. And yet, we're doing winks and nods here, and we're remaining very loyal over there. Rob is a good channel. I love him. And as he often says, Black Bolt sucks. I must have watched that video 4 times and I still died laughing. He is the best. Yes, Black Bolt most assuredly sucks. And I tend to land where Rob lands on a lot of stuff, not just because I like him. I think I don't know. I mean, I know Eric Voss from New Rockstars is great with Easter eggs and stuff like that. He's good. Ryan Airy from Screen Crush is great. I loved Brian Silliman, by the way, when he was filling in for Ryan Airy. I wish we could see more of him. He was really good. But when it comes to really taking the most complicated things about the comic book saga and teasing it out, nobody does it better than Rob. Nobody. Like when Eternals was coming out and he had to dissect all of the different things that were going on in terms of the cosmic saga and where the Eternals fit in and all of that stuff, he just did such an excellent job. No one does it better than him. Okay. So I'm good for a female, version of this kind of stuff. Sure. And also wherever I can, the lawyer stuff. I'm definitely doing a separate video about the Sokovia Accord. So if you want to see that, we'll see it. I've been busy with my real life stuff as an attorney, so I can only do these weekly reactions, but hopefully next week I can get that Sokovia Accords video out and why I think it's important that they said it here and what that means going forward in the MCU. All right. And why I think it got repealed, because that's important too. I don't think they just went, oh, it's repealed because they have some storytelling to do. I think it's very nuanced, and I like that they did that. Okay. So I'm going to have to wrap this up really quickly, but all I will say is that, so let's see. So I love the part where Daredevil, before they go and they overcome the goons, he gives her advice about the difference between goons and henchmen, which is a more comic book accurate representation about repealed, yes, about, the advice that he would give her and kind of giving her the big picture of things. But then there's just so much sexual tension going on. I'm like, they are not going to do what I think they're going to do. Thank you. It has been enjoyable. You are welcome, Justin. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't, because I'd love to see you back around. Definitely. And check out the stuff on my playlist, because you're definitely going to see a more in-depth, more nuanced explanation about how the writing in this series has been really, really good. Because it's not just a comedy and it's not just a superhero thing. They've woven in a lot of stuff that I've almost never parted company with them on. Today was a bit of an exception. So when he's sitting there going, I hear heartbeats and I hear yours too. And of course her heartbeat quickens, wouldn't yours? Even if you weren't sexually attracted to him, you'd be like, oh, you're focusing on that. And then he's like, she's smoldering at him, and I'm like, oh my God. And then she leans in a little, and I'm like, they're not about to kiss. But then they go in. I love how he tells her he's going to go in, wait for his signal. He's going to take the lead. He's going to take down the 10 goons that are downstairs or whatever, because that'll be most of them. But she's like, I'm just going to smash in and take him out. And he's like, no, we don't do that. She's like, well, She-Hulk's indestructible. That's not entirely true, but whatever. He's like, stealth is the way to go. Trust me, I've done this a million times. He is way more experienced than her. He's not being misogynistic, but and he's like, and I have echolocation, powers, okay? Because she's like, remind me who has the superhero powers? He's like, I've got echolocation. I see what you're doing. So he goes, and you have for a couple of minutes the typical like Daredevil fight scene that you would have seen in Netflix when he was going against the Hand. I love how it was choreographed. I love how it was shot. Then the next round of the 10 folks come in, and I'm like, oh boy, we're going to get even more bloodbathy, because they had one fight in the Netflix Saga where he was in the hallway, and that was like a 20-minute fight scene, and it was incredible. So I'm like, ooh, we're going to get more. And then she comes crashing down from the ceiling, and Hulk smashes them all, which was so perfect. It really was. And the timing was just priceless. It was an amazing fight scene all the way up to the Hulk smashing and she goes, She-Hulk smash. And then, of course, I have to go back and watch again, but they're playing Frogger and like all the arcade like games that you would think would be in, the lily pad or whatever. They go in and they fight. Leapfrog's like, you're supposed to be helping me. She goes, I am helping you by stopping you from racking up more charges and getting into more trouble. She releases Luke and tells him to go call the police. And I just love how he's not like, okay. He's like, do not yell at me. I'm already stressed out. And I'm like, oh my God. So then she urges Leapfrog to stop now. And she starts telling him, we could just claim that it's all an episode of Mania as a defense. So she's like, don't worry. If you stop now and you don't make things worse, I can defend this. And you've got Daredevil in the background while he's beating up more goons saying, temporary insanity is a strategy, but it's not a really good defense. I'd angle this more as a traumatic expression of PTSD. And he's kind of right, but he's not skipping a beat, which is funny. And then Leapfrog, of course, hears this, and he's like, is he a lawyer? And Daredevil knocks somebody else out, and he's like, no, I'm just a fan of legal dramas. So Jen does a fourth wall break yet again, and she's like, this guy is kind of doing it for me. So if you missed out on any of the sexual tension, or if you were like, are they, aren't they? This clarifies for you as a viewer, oh yeah, they are. And I'm like, I can't believe they're going to go there. They're just going to tease it. It's not going to happen. Then Leapfrog jumps out a window and he ends up really injuring himself. So the next scene, he's being carted away. And Luke Jacobson assures She-Hulk, oh, well, I suppose all is forgiven. And, I'll work on your dress for the legal gala and everything's even. So he goes, yes, I'll do it. I'm not a monster. And then he tells her not to get more bloated between now and the event. You're a monster, buddy, just not the way you think you are. So she's like, great to be strained professional acquaintances again. And he's like, uh-huh. So then she sits up top the building because as a vigilante, Daredevil's not going to get involved. She asks him if he's going to speak to the police, and he's like, no, that's not kind of my thing. And she's like, well, thank you with all of your help with this. And he's like, well, thank you for your help. And he's all pushing her, and she's pushing him back like they're having crushes on each other in freaking elementary school, And then they joke about who the lead superhero is and all this stuff. So she asks, when are you going back to New York? And he says, tomorrow. And she's like, oh, because she's clearly disappointed. And he goes, hey, maybe next time I'm in town, I'll take you to dinner. And she's like, yeah, maybe we could just skip all that. And then we go into her apartment and they're like stripping off all their clothes and they're going to.
Have a good day.
You're going to go, honey?
I got to go. I got to get out of here. He's staying home.
All right. I love you, honey. So they're like knocking boots and everything, which I thought was ridiculous. And of course, I love the extra little nuance where she's trying to get his superhero suit off and she can't, and he's got to show her how. Like, that kind of feels like real life layered on top of fantasy, right? Because you think superhero sex, it would all just be glorious. And meanwhile, they're like all awkward and trying to figure out how to get naked. And I love how you have them leading up. The camera pans up to the bedroom door where you have their bare feet, and you see like all the gear, his batons. Like, it's so funny. And I'm like, it's not comic book accurate that they did this. It is fun, and it is very, shall I say, very modern. Do I think I agree with, what is it, Justin and Lenny, when it's like, obviously it's not comic book accurate that they knocked boots together and they had sex. Um, but I think that they can be friends with benefits, right? So I don't think it's necessarily an insult, and I don't think this suddenly transforms everything into this glorious romance and stuff like that. Um, so I guess I could kind of sign off on it. I could ship them in that capacity. I would think that Daredevil would stink. So, and I love how he leaves barefoot the next morning with his boots in his hand. Like, he literally does the walk of shame, and then Nikki calls him out on it later, which is just the best. And of course, here's the comedy part. A woman's walking a dog like it's nothing, and he sees her and he's like, good morning, and it's like nothing wrong happened. At least he's polite, right? So Jen comes out of her living room. She does yet another fourth wall break. And she's like, it's weird. You guys are still here. Like, doesn't it feel like this episode should be over? But that's when Nikki comes in and says, hey, why aren't you returning my calls? We got to get ready for the gala. Then she tells that she reports that she saw this guy dressed like a devil leaving and doing the walk of shame. She figures out that Jen and him did stuff. And she goes, oh, and we're happy? And Jen's like, oh, we're happy. And she goes, all right, then you're the devil. I love it. So then there's another fourth wall break as she goes around the corner, Nikki. And Jennifer says to us, seriously, what is this scene? Like, this episode came to a very satisfying conclusion. Trust me. And she's got a big grin, which I think is really good to show a woman having confidence. She's not all torn up that he's going to New York and they're not having a relationship with one another, right? Or maybe they're just friends or friends with benefits. Fine. She's taking control and ownership over her, agency as a female. Good for her. And then Nikki's like, come on, we got to go. We got to do hair and makeup, and you can tell me all about it later. They get the gown from Luke, or they're going to get the gown from Luke. And then Jen does another fourth wall break, and she's stuck on it. Like, we're still doing the gala? Wait, we're doing the gala? Is the next episode the finale? This is kind of like a very nuanced fourth wall break. And then she admits to us, this is a big twist, isn't it? Like, but the question is it kind of the kind of twist where it's like, ooh, there's another Hulk, but this one's red. So I love how she's talking about Red Hulk and the possibility that they're either going to recast Thunderbolt Ross or they're going to put somebody in his place. Are they going to make Val the Contessa be the Hulk? I don't know how I feel about that, but whatever. I know that there's discussion about, our dear Han Solo maybe playing that part, but he's like 80, so I don't know about that. Then Nikki comes out with makeup brushes that look like Wolverine claws, and she's like, schnick. So I'm like, oh, come on, there's another Wolverine Easter egg. And then we go to the gala. Jen strolls out of the limo. She's doing the hair toss. This is what we saw in, how many trailers. She's looking fantastic. She's owning her moment. This is her time. Her parents are there, and her mother immediately is like, where's your jacket? Which is a total mom takedown / genuine concern. So she's like, well, what if you get cold? And Morris, who is ever the champion of his daughter in the comic books and also ever the champion of his daughter here, says she can wear my jacket. Of course, the mother has to scold her husband and say, your jacket won't cover her, Morris, which is totally what a mom would say. So then Nikki comes to Jennifer's defense, as ever a best friend would, and says you can't cover up a Luke Jacobson masterpiece, and they're going to be inside in like 2 seconds anyway. Get over it, Mom. Justin says the award scene is messed up. They gave it to all the women lawyers, and I'm glad that you noticed that before I said it, because I'm going to tell you what, that pisses women off when you do that. And I cannot say that I'm surprised, unfortunately. Like, I was for a split second, and I was like, they're making a good point. if a man wins an award, we don't dare put them all in line like it's a participation trophy. Okay, I hate to say that. And when it comes to the law, as it is with certain other fields, the corporate culture is still very, compared to like others today, it's still very stilted, it's still very conservative, it's still very old fashioned. The joke that the announcer makes when they're announcing the lawyer of the year, you know, that they're doing everything that the men do, but backwards and in heels. Backwards? It's kind of just a little like, look at all those little women go in the world that men are in. Aren't they just beautiful? And, you know, ugh. So Todd, of course, is hanging out with Mr. Holloway. We go inside where it's the Southern California Awards, the female lawyer of the year. They should have just put the S on there because it's annoying that they're going to line up a bunch of women and they all share the spotlight. Where if you had a male lawyer of the year, I guarantee you they're not doing that. I've never seen that happen with men, ever. The red and gold colors in the background, I'm like, coincidence, you know? So they announced Jennifer She-Hulk Walters first. So you go for the head fake of thinking, well, she is the lawyer of the year. And I'm like, is this now her middle name? Did she like officially claim it so that it's harder for somebody else to trademark? I don't know. Remember the trademark episode? But then they announce other names, including Natalie Book, who looks aggravated that she too has to share this. I don't think her aggravation was because she has to share it with Jen. I think it's because they have to share it at all, right? So then as they're asking each woman in their participation trophy line how they feel to get their participation trophy, the first female lawyer gives your typical, Miss America contestant answer, hair tossing. And then they get to Mallory Book, and she just cuts through the crap as her character would normally do. It's twice the work and half the recognition. And then everyone asks you what it's like to be a female lawyer. Men are not asked what it's like to be a male lawyer. They're just not. So I'm like, good for you, Mallory. That's how I would answer it. And then She-Hulk, they come to her. She's thanking her parents, thanking her colleagues. That's the right thing to do. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for everybody else who worked on this with me. But then, the Hulk King logo comes on behind her. The Intelligencia has clearly hijacked the event. They say, do you want to see who She-Hulk really is? And Jen's unflappable in the beginning. She's like, oh, my identity is hardly a secret, because she's like, oh, if they're going to show that I'm Jennifer Walters in the background, who cares? But then you see the guys wearing their plastic masks. This is the Intelligencia. This is the truth. She-Hulk does not deserve your attention and respect. They claim that she stole the powers from the Hulk, which is ridiculous, of course. Then they showcase a lot of things that they've cloned from her phone. And then I don't think that Jennifer knew that the video was being taken. I think that was a video that was taken from Josh's phone. I don't think they recorded a sex scene or anything like that. I mean, they could have, but that's not how any of the scenes or flashbacks up till now characterized it with her phone. He was cloning her phone, and some of the material that came off was from her phone. I love her answer, says Justin. I do too. I think it's fair, and she's playing her politics right. But then, then the Intelligencia hijack everything, and they call her a slut, and then they show a slut shaming video, which I really hate to say it. Again, I'm not saying women can never do this to men, but go Google the statistics. Slut shaming videos and things like that are typically the victim is a woman. And you start to see her having sex with Josh, and that's where she kind of loses it. She doesn't lose it as other things come up on the screen. She doesn't lose it when they say, oh, she allegedly stole her powers from the Hulk. She can prove who her cousin is. That's not her concern. Her concern is that they're slut shaming her. And that's the sort of thing that if you don't see it coming, I don't care what your sexual identification is or whatever, or what your sexual preference is, it's going to throw you off your feet. She gets really mad and her eyes kind of glow red. And I'm like, ooh, are we going to have like World Breaker She-Hulk stuff going on? And Mallory sees it coming and she's like, don't do it, Jen, but it's just she kind of very quickly goes into Savage She-Hulk mode. She breaks the screen so nobody can see anymore. The lights are going on and off. Everything's red and flashing. So I'm sure security got tripped. She turns around. She's clearly not thrilled with herself. She sees everyone running. That's making her feel worse. So she didn't go into full-blown Savage She-Hulk mode, because if she did, she wouldn't have cared or wouldn't have registered. She also sees Intelligencia agents recording her reaction. And then it keeps going back and forth to her reaction. She's like, crap, I gave them what they wanted. Then she sees one of them running off that she might be able to catch. So she breaks through the exterior wall and does scruff the guy and hold up the guy to everyone else. And it's interesting to me how the DODC, or the Department of Damage Control, was there immediately with their weapons. How did they know to be there? Why would they be at? Okay, I wonder if you asked yourself this. Why would they be at this event? This doesn't seem to be the kind of event that the DODC would be involved with, that they would provide monitoring for. So I wonder how they were there just that quickly. And so hopefully we see more of how that plays off later. I wonder also how this is going to play off in the New World Order Captain America 4 video. Does the New World Order involve the Department of Damage Control, who honestly we have not seen be sympathetic in terms of the agency or the characters really at all, having to do with it at all. Like if you saw Miss Marvel, you weren't loving on the Department of Damage Control there either, all the way back to when they're cleaning stuff up and they're kicking out Vulture in the Spider-Man movie. And they're like, sorry, we're here. Goodbye. Too bad. Like nobody cares, So they've got all their lasers painted all over her. So she's got to let this guy go, which he does. And he runs off. So now she's got nothing. They've got stuff on her. And she's staring at the camera all helpless because she's like, I just screwed myself and they just played me. They were warned, said Justin. Yeah, I'm thinking the Department of Damage Control got a tip called in. Maybe that would be the least innocuous reason why they were there. That's plausible, Justin. Also, they could be in on it. We don't know. So that's like an intriguing are they, aren't they kind of nuance. And I like that for the writing. So then we go into the end credits. So most, you have the staple ones that are always there. You see an auction for Wakandan goods going on, and you see both Todd and Eugene Leapfrog there, and they both have bidding paddles. We see a separate one where you see the Daredevil mask with Jen's pink bra on top of it and, tangled up bed sheets. Okay, we know they did the deed, right? And then we see Nikki catching Daredevil doing the walk of shame and laughing. And again, there's no stinger scene. So I've given my thoughts on this before, why they had said they were going to do 9 different stinger scenes or, post-credit scenes, and why after 3 they capped it off. I think that they've been very public that Ryan Coogler for Wakanda Forever is still there's still some last minute shoots and or editing that's going on with that movie. And I think that now at this point, we're definitely talking about Wakanda more actively and Todd having gone there and stuff. I don't know if, depending upon how a previous version of the storytelling was going to go for Wakanda Forever, that they would have more cutscenes or post-credit scenes or not. So unfortunately, I'm thinking that some of the change-ups that they did with Wakanda Forever probably impacted at least some of the post-credit scenes for She-Hulk, and they had to take it out. it's a bummer, but I know that when it comes to the death of Chadwick Boseman alone, Wakanda Forever was going to be like a really difficult project to work on emotionally, but also intellectually. And then, how many Black Panthers are we going to have and what they're going to do with the storyline moving forward? He's had his hands full with that. So I understand that he's still shifting stuff around. The movie's still slated to come out November 11th. 1111 is also a very high spiritual number, if you believe in such things. And so that might also be a wink and a nod to Chadwick Boseman's passing and or where the storytelling is going to go, in a very spiritual, elevated place, like maybe the ancestral plane. So I think they're going to stick to that release date, but there's just a whole lot of shuffling going on still with that movie, and it's weeks away. So I think that affected at least some of the post-credit scenes that we were still supposed to get. I was like, ooh, they mentioned Wakanda specifically several times. And, the lance was stolen and Todd studied there. Like, we've got to see something that's going to pull us into Black Panther, and we didn't. Do I really think that they're going to still leave a post-credit scene for episode 9, which comes next week, and that's the last one for the season? I do. Do I think that that one is going to lead more into Captain America New World Order and the leader, because they already announced the same actor's coming back to play him, and then he's supposed to be the big bad there? Yep, I do. But I don't think we're going to see anything having to do with Wakanda. That said, Todd saying that he studied there and he has a connection there is going to weave us back in somehow. They would not leave that part in She-Hulk if it didn't mean something. So that's it. Do you guys have any questions or any concerns, or did you spot any Easter eggs that I hadn't? I saw some along the way, but again, this is my first viewing. I need to go back and see things again. Like I said, there's a street sign. There's a couple things that I need to check into. But Wolvie's definitely coming. Well, now we know that Wolverine is coming because they announced it for Deadpool 3. So I did a video recently that I now have to do a recant video, or at least a recant live stream, where I'm like, I still stand behind my opinions for, Hugh Jackman saying he's not going to come back as Wolverine, and then he's coming back for Deadpool 3, and whether I think that's a good idea or not a good idea. I'll have my kind of recant but not video come out to kind of pair up and partner with that one. But I love how the two of them were like, we love you, Kevin Feige. Yeah, I'm sure they dropped a lot of money onto Hugh Jackman to make that happen, because for the last 2+ years, he's had some pretty thorough reasons about why he wouldn't put himself through the physical transformation that he needs to get shredded, and then for certain scenes to cut weight. It's a lot to do in your 20s and 30s. The guys my age, we're Gen Xers. Holy crap. So... So the Wolverine Easter eggs, like from a couple episodes ago, and then this one where she comes out with the claws. Yeah, okay, we get it. Wolverine's definitely coming back. But I've told you they've dropped way more Easter eggs for Iron Man. Way more. And then they did another one here. He's coming back too. Whether he's RDJ or not, I don't know. Lenny Fiasco says, great insights. As someone who doesn't often have time for these shows, I appreciate these recaps and deep dives. And Justin Creer's like, lol, money. Yep. I wish that my replay comments would appear, because man, I'm telling you now, money, emojis are being dropped by me, man. I'll do the emoji face, the smiley face with the tongue too, because I'm thinking that that's ultimately what happened. Because I know that Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman have been friends for a long time, but years ago he said no in an interview, and Ryan Reynolds did a tweet on Twitter, of course. It said, "I'm glad that Hugh Jackman is no longer allergic to selfish." He was kind of pissed. So, honestly, for him to be denying for 2, 3, 4, 5 years that he's not going to play Wolverine anymore, and then Logan was the perfect ending of that particular version of Wolverine's character arc. I mean, again, Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds said in a recent video that showed up on Ryan's channel, they're not going to touch the ending. And that does happen several years into the future from where Earth 616 is now. So at least they're acknowledging that they're not going to change the end of that particular character's character arc, which I respect. But beyond that, I'm like, they dropped a ton of cash on Hugh, and he said, fine, one more time. I do think he meant it for a long time that he wasn't going to come back, that he's on other projects and happy to do other things. Okay, so anybody got anything they want to share? What did you like? What did you not like? Lenny Fiasco, you are most welcome. I do like to do deep dives from the lawyer perspective, and I definitely like to do deep dives from the female perspective, where any of that is applicable or appropriate. But again, I will say, well, I'm just waiting to see if anybody else. Oh, did he have to do a multi-movie deal? There was some discussion, and I don't know who to credit with this. Do I credit Charlie from Emergency Awesome with this? But I know that I have heard that when Marvel Studios does deals, the way their contracts tend to go is you have like main appearances where you're starring or co-starring, and that counts as a credit if you do have a multi-movie deal. But sometimes the little cameo things that they do, that doesn't count against your credit for a multi-movie appearance. So for example, going all the way back to Loki season 1, when you had oh goodness, hold on, let me see. When you had Chris Hemsworth doing the voice for Frog Thor, very briefly, in a very Easter eggy appearance towards the end of Loki season 1. That was so brief, that would not count if the contracts worked the way I think it was Charlie said. Gosh, and then you've got so many people who have like industry insider, connections that I lack, but I'm an attorney and they're not, so doo-dah. No, they're awesome, and they inspired me to do this. So I don't think that Hugh Jackman had to do a multi-movie deal. I hadn't heard that. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. Gosh, he's starting all his extreme training now. So Wolverine's definitely coming, but mark my words, Iron Man's definitely going to come back. And I don't think just because Hugh Jackman is showing up as Wolverine in Deadpool 3, that's going to go in one of the slots for phase 6. So we're about to go into phase 5 because Wakanda Forever is supposed to close out phase 4. Although I'm like, Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday movie, that doesn't close out phase 4, but whatever. Phase 4 is closing anytime now. We're going to be in phase 5 soon. I do think the Deadpool 3 movie has to be a phase 6 movie. I like that what they said, Armor Wars is going to be elevated to a full-blown movie and not a series anymore, which tells me they're packing a lot of storytelling into that, which I appreciate. And so they're like, I do think that the Disney Plus series gives you a lot of exposition and backstory and investment into characters. And you're not always going to see fight. Like, this was a great, how this episode doesn't please you, whether you're a Deadpool fan or not, I don't even know what to say. But I think that they're giving you all of the foundation laying for the characters that we've had introduced or reintroduced to us, like a rehabilitated Loki, like Miss Marvel, like She-Hulk, because these guys are going to either be part of the Avengers for quite some time to come and or are going to factor in as part of the multiverse saga. And if something happens to any of these characters, they want you to be invested in them. You know, they want you to genuinely be afraid if they're threatened. They want you to genuinely mourn them if they were to pass on, like Black Widow did, you know, like Tony Stark did. You know, and even like, again, spoilers for everything, like Logan did when he met his end in the Logan movie, and Professor X met his end. So I have to be honest with you, like, if they don't build these characters up, the versions of the characters that you get to know in the main universe, which for us is 616, then these stories lack the narrative impact that they need to. And then the franchise stalls for it. So I think Disney Plus, they are introducing and laying down foundation, and then they weave and spin these characters up into the bigger movies. We are going to have Werewolf by Night after She-Hulk's done. So perfect for October / horror / Halloween and all that. And you are going to get more of the Midnight Suns introduced. I love how they're doing Elsa Bloodstone. I love how they're doing Man-Thing. And of course, I love how they're going to be doing Werewolf by Night. That's really cool. Hey, Second Street Marvel, what's up? Trinity, I hope all is well. I just woke up and I'm getting ready to watch. Well, then I don't want to spoil anything, although if you saw any of my description for this video, then, you know, it's been spoiled. But I like how they handled the relationship without, now that Trinity's here, I don't want to spoil it because he hasn't watched it yet. I like how they handled the relationship because it's very modern. I don't think it has to mean anything. I think it's fine. So that's going to be my final say on that. And this is the first time where what was done in court, I agree with what the judge did. I think that the prosecution on behalf of the plaintiff was left a little wanting. I do. And I think defendant was very self-centered in a sense, but whatever. He did right by his client. All right, so that's it, guys. I'm going to do a video on the Sokovia Accords. I've already ordered my thumbnail for that. And I will cover why I think the MCU is handling it the way they did. Okay, and I will be breaking down some more stuff. Just the attorney stuff's really kept me busy. And I will talk to you later, guys. Bye. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't.